Senior researcher Ixel's crystalline sensory filaments detected the anomaly before the ship's instruments did. A disturbance in the quantum fabric of space, subtle, almost imperceptible, but distinctly unnatural. In her 3 centuries of deep space research, she had never encountered anything quite like it. Primary pilot Kex. She transmitted through the Kelveri vessel's neural network. Adjust our heading 15 degrees starboard. There's something unusual in the void. The Kelveri research vessel, with its delicate crystalline spires and bioorganic hull, altered course gracefully. Like all Kelveri ships, the Luminous Seeker was designed to be beautiful first and functional second. Their species believed that the cosmos responded better to elegance than brutality. The anomaly grew stronger as they approached. Ixel's sensory filaments trembled with increasing intensity, picking up frequencies that shouldn't exist in normal space. The ship's more conventional sensors began registering the disturbance as well, displaying cascading patterns of quantum instability across their holographic displays. Senior researcher, First Observer Trill's neural patterns carried an edge of concern. These readings match no known phenomenon in our databases. Perhaps we should maintain a safer distance. Ixel's response crystallized with certainty. The third tenet of research. Knowledge flowers only in the garden of risk. Continue approach. The anomaly suddenly spiked. Space itself seemed to shudder, twisting in ways that made Ixel's auxiliary brain clusters ache. A massive tear appeared in the fabric of reality, not like any known form of faster-than-light travel. This was something else entirely. Through that tear emerged a ship. Ixel's primary heart nearly stopped. Where Kelveri vessels were grown from living crystal and shaped by aesthetic algorithms, this vessel was wrong. Hard angles, exposed weapon systems, armor plating that looked thick enough to survive a stellar core. It radiated power and purpose, but not a single trace of unnecessary beauty. Unknown vessel detected. The Luminous Seeker's threat assessment systems announced unnecessarily. Configuration matches no known species. Size classification. Titan class. Weapon signature analysis. Beyond measurement parameters. The vessel was enormous, at least 4 times the size of their research ship. Its hull was a dark gray that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. What they had initially taken for design flaws, the exposed systems and sharp angles, began to resolve into a cohesive and terrifying whole. This wasn't a ship designed to look threatening. It was a ship designed to be threatening, with every component oriented for maximum combat efficiency. Receiving transmission, First Observer Trill reported. Unknown format. Translating. A voice filled their neural network. Not the crystalline thought patterns of the Kelveri, but something raw and alien. The ship's systems converted it into understandable forms. Kelveri vessel. This is Commander Elena Santos of the Terran Strategic Ship Vigilant. Do not be alarmed by our appearance. We come with peaceful intent. The words were diplomatic. The ship bristling with weapon systems suggested otherwise. Greetings, Commander Santos. Ixel transmitted back, her patterns carefully controlled. I am Senior Researcher Ixel of the Luminous Seeker. We are a scientific vessel studying quantum phenomena in this sector. May I ask your species designation? Our databases contain no record of Terrans. There was a pause. When Commander Santos responded, there was something else in her voice, something that made Ixel's threat receptors tingle. We're human, Santos said, and we apologize for our sudden appearance. We've been trying to keep a low profile, but circumstances have forced us to make ourselves known. Tell me, Senior Researcher, have any of your deep space outposts gone silent recently? Any ships disappeared without explanation? Ixel's sensory filaments stiffened. How could you know about that? The disappearances are classified information. Because we've been tracking what's responsible. We've followed it across 12 galaxies, through places your species hasn't even imagined. And now it's here, in your sector of space. What is it? Ixel asked, even as her auxiliary brain screamed at her to retreat. "Something old," Santos replied. "Something that hunts civilizations. We call them void stalkers. They're why we built ships like the Vigilant. Why we had to become what we are." The human ship's engines pulsed with barely contained power. Ixal's instruments registered energy readings that should have been impossible for a vessel that size. "Your people are in danger," Santos continued. "The Void Stalker has already taken 3 of your outposts. We managed to save the 4th, but the entity escaped. That's why we're here. We need your help to find it before it strikes again." "Our help." Ixal's confusion resonated through her neural patterns. What could we possibly offer a species capable of building this? "Knowledge," Santos said simply. "You know these sectors. The quantum patterns. The places where something could hide. We're hunters, senior researcher. The best in the galaxy. But even the best hunters need guides in unfamiliar territory." Ixal processed this. The implications were staggering. A species advanced enough to track threats across galaxies, to build ships that defied physics as she understood it, was asking for their help. "And if we refuse, then we continue our hunt alone," Santos replied, "and hope we find the Void Stalker before it finds your homeworld. But I don't think you'll refuse. Your species values knowledge above all else, and we have knowledge you've never dreamed of." The human commander was right. The 3rd tenet practically demanded they accept. And yet, why? Ixal asked. "Why hunt these entities across galaxies? What do your people gain?" There was another pause. When Santos spoke again, her voice carried something that the translation protocols struggled to convey. Pride, determination, purpose. "Because someone has to," she said. "Because we looked out at the stars and saw beauty, yes, but also darkness. And we decided that as long as humanity exists, that darkness will never go unchallenged. That's who we are. That's what we became." Ixal's sensory filaments wavered as she considered the human's words. She had always believed that the cosmos responded better to elegance than brutality. But perhaps there were things in the darkness that required a different approach. Perhaps there was a kind of elegance in humanity's dedication to their self-appointed task. "Very well, Commander Santos," she transmitted. "The luminous seeker is at your disposal. Let us hunt together." The human ship's running lights pulsed once in acknowledgement, and as Ixal watched the terrible beauty of its design, she realized that the galaxy had just changed forever. Humanity had emerged from the darkness, not as conquerors or explorers, but as something else entirely. They were guardians, protectors, hunters of things that hunted civilizations. And the hunt was about to begin. The holographic display aboard the luminous seeker cast ethereal patterns across Ixal's crystalline form as she studied the data Commander Santos had shared. The images showed worlds she had never seen before, civilizations reduced to empty ruins, entire species vanished without a trace. Each disappearance followed the same pattern that now threatened her own people. These records spanned thousands of years, Ixal transmitted, her neural patterns tinged with disbelief. "You've been hunting these entities for so long." "No," Santos replied through the communication link. "We only joined the hunt 3 centuries ago. All of this happened before we reached the stars. The Void Stalkers have been culling civilizations since before our species learned to make fire." The human commander's image flickered in the holographic field beside the data display. Even through the projection, she radiated an intensity that made Ixal's threat receptors resonate. Everything about humans seemed to trigger primal warning responses in other species. "Then how did you survive?" First Observer Trill asked from his station. "If these entities destroy advanced civilizations, how did humanity reach the point where you could fight them?" Santos smiled, an expression that Ixal's cultural database flagged as both diplomatic and predatory. "Because we were never an advanced civilization when they found us. We were barely testing our first fusion drives when a Void Stalker arrived in our solar system. It wasn't hunting us. We were too primitive to register as prey. It was just passing through. The commander's expression darkened, but we saw it, and unlike every other species, we could track it. Ixal's auxiliary brains processed this information. Impossible. Our sensors can barely detect these entities even with your provided data. How could a pre-spacefaring civilization track one? Because tracking isn't about technology, Santos said. It's about instinct, pattern recognition, reading signs that most species never evolved to notice. Humanity spent millions of years as persistence hunters, chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We learned to read the smallest signs: broken twigs, displaced dust, thermal residue. When we saw the Void Stalker, we recognized something familiar: prey signs, just on a cosmic scale. The human ship Vigilant loomed outside the luminous Seeker's viewing field, its massive form a constant reminder of how humanity had evolved from those primitive hunters. Every weapon system, every armor plate, every power conduit had been designed with a single purpose: to hunt the most dangerous prey in existence. The entity didn't expect us to notice it, Santos continued. No species ever had before. It didn't expect us to remember its quantum signature, to recognize its hunting patterns, and it certainly didn't expect us to spend the next 50 years building our civilization around one goal: hunting it down. Ixal's sensory filaments wavered as she processed the implications. Your entire society, just to hunt these entities. You've seen our ship, senior researcher. Does it look like it was designed for exploration? For trade, for diplomacy? Santos gestured at the Vigilant's brutal form. Every technological advancement we made was focused on one purpose. Our quantum drives weren't developed to establish colonies. They were made to track Void Stalkers through dimensional tiers. Our weapons aren't for warfare with other species. They're specifically calibrated to harm entities that exist partially outside normal spacetime. But why? Trill asked. Why dedicate everything to hunting something that wasn't even threatening your species? Santos was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made Ixal's translation protocols strain to convey the full meaning. Because that's what humans do. We see something hunting the helpless, and we can't let it go. It's not a choice we made. It's written into our DNA. We spent millions of years evolving not just the ability to hunt, but the drive to protect our tribe. And somewhere along the way, our definition of tribe grew to include every sentient species in the galaxy. The commander's eyes fixed on Ixal with an intensity that made her crystalline structure resonate. When we finally caught up with that first Void Stalker, we learned something crucial. These entities, they're not invincible. They're not gods. They're just predators who've never faced real competition. And humanity. We've spent our entire existence learning how to deal with dangerous predators. New data flowed through the neural network, records of the first human encounter with a Void Stalker. Ixal watched in fascination as tactical data showed a much smaller, more primitive version of the Vigilant pursuing the entity through 11-dimensional phases. The hunt lasted 6 months, ending in a confrontation that left half of Earth's solar system reduced to quantum particulates. We killed it, Santos said simply. And then we found out there were more. Hundreds more, scattered across the galaxies. So we built better ships, developed better weapons, improved our tracking techniques, and we began the Great Hunt. And now one of these entities is hunting my people, Ixal transmitted, her patterns carrying equal parts fear and determination. Yes, but now your people have something no other hunted species has had before. Santos smiled again, and this time Ixal's threat receptors recognized something else in the expression. Not predatory intent, but the confidence of an apex predator offering protection. You have humanity standing between you and the darkness. We've spent 3 centuries perfecting our role as the galaxy's guardians. Trust me, senior researcher, this Void Stalker has no idea what's coming for it. The Vigilant sensors suddenly pulsed with increased activity. Santos' expression shifted, becoming more focused, more primal. Speaking of which, we're picking up quantum distortions 3 sectors away. Your station at Helios Beta just went dark. Ixal felt her primary heart stutter. Helios Beta was one of their largest research outposts, home to over 10,000 Kelveri scientists and their families. Then we have no time to waste, she transmitted, pushing aside her fear. Our sensors are calibrated to local quantum frequencies. We can provide real-time tracking data. Perfect. Santos nodded sharply. Humanity brings the teeth. Your people bring the eyes. Together, we're going to show this entity why it should have stayed in the dark where it belonged. As both ships prepared for quantum translation, Ixal realized that her species' belief in elegance over brutality needed revision. Sometimes, the most elegant solution was the presence of a bigger predator. And humanity, it seemed, had spent centuries becoming the biggest predator of all. The hunt was no longer approaching. It had begun. The quantum tear closed behind them, as both ships materialized in the Helios Beta sector. The research station should have been visible immediately, a massive crystalline structure housing thousands of Kelveri. Instead, there was only darkness and debris. Life signs. Ixal transmitted, her neural patterns stripped of everything but raw urgency. None detected. First observer Trill responded, his own patterns trembling. The station's quantum core is still intact. Movement. Commander Santos interrupted through the comlink. Massive gravitational distortion at bearing 347. Senior researcher, are you seeing this? Ixal's sensory filaments quivered as she processed the sensor data. The luminous Seeker's instruments were detecting something vast moving through the quantum foam of space-time itself. Not swooning through it, hunting through it. By the first crystal, Trill transmitted, the void itself is bleeding. He wasn't wrong. Space was tearing open in ways that defied the laws of physics, revealing glimpses of something that Ixal's minds couldn't properly process. It was enormous, its true form hidden in dimensions that her species had never evolved to perceive. Don't look directly at it, Santos commanded. Your brains aren't wired to handle visual contact. Let your instruments do the work. The human's voice carried none of the terror that Ixal felt, only focused intensity. This one's bigger than usual, probably why it's hunting such large targets. The Void Stalker fully emerged into normal space, and Ixal's threat receptors nearly overloaded. It was a writhing mass of dark energy and twisted spacetime, roughly the size of a small moon. Tendrils of pure gravitational force reached out from its core, each capable of tearing the ship apart. What do we do? Trill asked, his patterns becoming erratic with fear. We hunt, Santos replied simply. Then her voice shifted to a command tone. Vigilant, battle stations. All hands to combat protocols. Deploy quantum anchors. The human warship's transformation was immediate and terrifying. Weapon ports that had been merely threatening before now blazed with contained energy. The ship's entire hull began to emit a field that somehow made it appear more real than its surroundings, as if it were forcing the local spacetime to conform to its presence rather than the other way around. Kelveri vessel, maintain your position at coordinates Mark 7. Santos ordered. Your sensors are our eyes. Feed targeting data directly to our systems. Ixal had barely acknowledged the command when the Void Stalker attacked. One of its gravitational tendrils lashed out at impossible speed, aiming to crush the luminous Seeker like a crystalline toy. But the humans had been ready. The Vigilant intercepted the tendril with what looked like a beam of concentrated reality, a weapon that didn't so much destroy its target as force it to exist solely in normal spacetime. The tendril recoiled, and for the first time, Ixal heard something like pain emanate from the cosmic horror. Multiple quantum signatures detected. Trill reported, his fear giving way to scientific fascination. The entity is trying to shift between dimensional phases. Oh no you don't, Santos growled. Not this time. Vigilant, deploy the net. Full spread. Dozens of small objects launched from the human ship, forming a complex geometric pattern around the Void Stalker. Each one activated, creating a field that Ixal's instruments couldn't properly measure. The entity tried to retreat into higher dimensions, but the fields held it in place. Senior researcher, Santos called out, "We need a vulnerability analysis. Your sensors are more attuned to local space-time than ours." Ixal forced her terror aside and focused on the data streaming through the Luminous Seeker's neural network. The entity's quantum structure is more ordered than it appears. There's a pattern to its dimensional shifting, like a crystalline lattice, but in 11-dimensional space. "A lattice can be shattered," Santos replied. "Feed us the pattern coordinates." The battle that followed defied description in normal space. The Void Stalker thrashed and twisted, its tendrils striking out with enough force to warp reality itself. But the Vigilant moved with impossible precision, each of its weapons targeting specific points in the entity's quantum structure. "Its attacks are weakening," Trill reported. "The pattern is beginning to destabilize." "Because it's not used to prey that fights back," Santos said, her voice carrying a predatory satisfaction. "Void Stalkers are ambush hunters. They've spent millions of years culling species that never saw them coming. But humanity, we're persistence hunters. We don't just fight. We wear our prey down. We exploit every weakness. And we never, ever stop." The Vigilant launched its final assault. Weapons that Ixal couldn't even begin to understand struck the Void Stalker's quantum lattice at precisely calculated points. The entity's form began to collapse in on itself, its dimensional structure failing. "Clear the area," Santos ordered. "It's about to." The Void Stalker exploded, not in normal space, but in all 11 dimensions it occupied. The Luminous Seeker's sensors overloaded, and Ixal felt several of her auxiliary brains shut down from the quantum feedback. When her senses recovered, the entity was gone. In its place was a spreading cloud of quantum particles, already beginning to decay into normal spacetime. The laws of physics reasserted themselves, and the void stopped bleeding. "Target eliminated," Santos reported formally. "Standard containment protocols in effect. We'll need to sweep the sector for dimensional remnants, but the immediate threat is neutralized." Ixal's sensory filaments were still vibrating from the battle. I've never seen anything like that. The way your ship moved, the weapons you used. 300 years of specialized evolution," Santos replied. "Every engagement teaches us more about how to hunt them. Every victory makes us better predators." She paused. "I know this was difficult to witness, senior researcher. Most species aren't prepared to see warfare on this scale." "No," Ixal transmitted, her patterns firming with resolution. "Most species aren't prepared to see salvation on this scale. My people thought we were doomed when our outposts began going dark. Instead, we found you." Santos was quiet for a moment. "There are more Void Stalkers out there. This won't be the last one to threaten your people." "But now we know we're not alone in the dark," Ixal replied. "Now we know that humanity stands between us and the horrors that hunt among the stars." "Always," Santos confirmed. "That's what we do. That's what we are." Her voice took on a more practical tone. "Now let's see about finding any survivors from the station. And then, we hunt down any others lurking in your sectors." As the ships began their search pattern, Ixal reflected on how her understanding of the universe had changed. Her people had always believed that elegance was the highest virtue, that beauty would triumph over brutality. But there was a different kind of beauty in humanity's dedication to their self-appointed role, in their willingness to make themselves into weapons to protect species that had never asked for their help, in their relentless drive to hunt down the monsters that haunted the darkness between stars. The galaxy's greatest predators had become its greatest protectors, and that, Ixal realized, was perhaps the most elegant outcome of all. The debris field that had once been Helios Beta Station stretched across 2 million kilometers of space. The Luminous Seeker and the Vigilant moved through it methodically, their sensors probing every fragment for signs of survivors or dimensional contamination. "Another storage pod intact," Ixal transmitted, her patterns carrying both hope and sorrow. Biological stasis systems still functioning. 3 more of our people saved. That makes 47 survivors total, Santos replied through the comlink. Her voice was gentle but focused. The Void Stalker was sloppy this time. Usually they don't leave anyone alive. Ixal's sensory filaments detected a subtle change in the quantum background radiation. Commander, are you seeing this? The temporal echoes are getting stronger. We see it. The human's voice shifted to that predatory tone that Ixal was learning to recognize. The entity's attack left traces in the quantum foam, like footprints in soft ground. There was a pause. Your people's sensors are incredible at picking up these subtle distortions. No wonder they chose your sectors to hunt in. What do you mean? Void stalkers are drawn to species with highly developed quantum technology, Santos explained. Your crystalline computing, your neural networks, they create patterns in spacetime that these entities can track. It's like a beacon to them. First observer Trill's patterns rippled with concern. Then our very civilization is drawing them to us. Our achievements are making us targets. Knowledge always carries risk, Santos replied. But that's why we're here. Humanity appointed itself guardian of sapient species precisely because we recognize that advancement shouldn't be a death sentence. Her voice hardened. No species should have to choose between progress and survival. The vigilant sensors pulsed, sending waves of quantum energy through the debris field. The human ship had been modified several times since their first encounter, incorporating Kelvary sensing technology into its hunting systems. It was a marriage of human warfare and Kelvary science that made both ships more effective. Tell me something, Commander, Ixal transmitted while analyzing the latest sensor data. In all your centuries of hunting, have you ever considered simply warning other species, telling them about the threat before it finds them? We tried, early on, Santos said, but it never worked. Most species either didn't believe us or, worse, tried to exploit the knowledge. Some tried to capture void stalkers for study. Others attempted to use our warnings to gain political power. The results were catastrophic. Ixal processed this. So you chose to hunt in silence instead. Yes, we protect the galaxy's civilizations without their knowledge. It's cleaner that way. Safer. Santos paused. Your people are the first we've actively collaborated with in over a century. Your response to our presence was unique. How so? You didn't fear us, Santos said simply. Well, you did, but you didn't let that fear control you. You saw beyond our military nature to understand our purpose. That's rare. A new alert pulsed through the luminous seeker's neural network. Ixal's auxiliary brains processed the data rapidly. Commander, we're detecting a quantum wake, 3 light-years out, bearing 27 Mark IV. I see it. Santa's voice took on that focused hunter's edge again. The temporal traces match our target's signature. It's another void stalker, probably the one that destroyed your previous outposts. They often hunt in pairs. Trill's patterns showed confusion. But the quantum wake is already several hours old. The entity could be anywhere by now. No, Santos said, and Ixal could hear the predatory smile in her voice. It's exactly where we need it to be. Senior researcher, remember what I told you about humanity's evolution as persistence hunters. You tracked prey by following its signs until it exhausted itself, Ixal recalled. Exactly. And that's what we've been doing here. Every scan, every analysis of the debris, we weren't just looking for survivors. We were establishing a pattern. The vigilance engines began to pulse with building power. Void stalkers are ambush predators. They strike hard and fast, then retreat to safe territory to consume the quantum energy they've absorbed. And thanks to your sensors, we now know exactly where this one's territory is. Ixal's filaments quivered as she understood. The entire rescue operation was also a hunting operation, Santos confirmed. We're not just following its tracks, we're following its habits, its instincts, the same way our ancestors followed herds across the African plains. The human commander's voice carried that unique mixture of scientific precision and primal intensity that seemed to define her species. Would your ship like to participate in the next phase of the hunt? Ixal didn't hesitate. The luminous seeker stands ready, Commander. Good, because this next part is going to demonstrate another unique aspect of human hunting techniques. Santos' voice took on an almost eager quality. We're very, very good at setting traps. The human ship's quantum drive began to spin up, its power signature carefully modulated to avoid detection. The luminous seeker synchronized its own systems, its crystalline structure resonating in harmony with the Vigilant's more brutal technology. You know what the Void Stalkers never understood about humans? Santos asked as both ships prepared for quantum translation. They evolved to hunt species that run and hide. But when humans encounter a predator, we don't run. We don't hide. Her voice dropped to a determined whisper. We hunt it back. As the ships vanished into quantum space, Ixal reflected on how much her understanding had evolved. She had first seen humanity as frightening, then as protectors. Now she was beginning to see them as something even more fascinating. Teachers. They were showing her people not just how to survive the darkness between stars, but how to stand against it. The hunt was entering its final phase. And this time, the Kelveri would not be mere witnesses. They would be participants in humanity's ancient art of turning prey into predator. The quantum trap was set. The luminous seeker hung in space, its crystalline structure deliberately damaged to leak quantum energy into the void. The ship looked vulnerable, wounded, perfect prey for a Void Stalker. But beneath that appearance of weakness lay humanity's most ancient hunting strategy, the ambush. Energy signature approaching. First observer Trill transmitted, his pattern steady despite the tension. Moving exactly as predicted. They're creatures of pure instinct. Commander Santos' voice came through the comlink, transmitted from where the Vigilant waited in quantum shadow. They can't resist an easy target. Your people's technology makes excellent bait. The quantum frequencies are like blood in the water. Ixal monitored the approaching distortion in spacetime. The Void Stalker was moving more cautiously than its predecessor, perhaps sensing something different about this prey. But its hunger would override its caution. They always did. You know, Santos said conversationally, her ship coiled like a predator ready to strike. There's an old human saying, the devil's greatest trick was convincing the world he didn't exist. For centuries, that's how the Void Stalkers survived, by staying just beyond the perception of their prey. And humanity's greatest trick? Ixal asked, watching the entity draw closer. Convincing them we were just another spacefaring species. There was that predatory smile in Santos' voice again. They never realized we were designed by evolution itself to be their perfect counter-predator. Every trait that helped us survive on Earth made us uniquely suited to hunt them. The void began to bleed as the entity emerged into normal space. It was smaller than the first one they'd encountered, but moved with a deadly grace that spoke of experience. Its gravitational tendrils reached out, probing the luminous seeker's apparent vulnerabilities. Our pattern recognition skills evolved to track prey across vast savannas. Santos continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. Our stamina evolved for persistence hunting. Our social structures evolved to coordinate group attacks. Even our capacity for tool use evolved to help us hunt things bigger and stronger than ourselves. The Void Stalker committed to its attack run, its form distorting space as it charged the seemingly helpless Kelveri vessel. It never saw the quantum net until it was too late. Now, Santos commanded. The Vigilant erupted from quantum shadow directly above the entity, its weapons already firing. Simultaneously, the luminous seeker's damaged sections transformed, revealing integrated human weapon systems that Santos' crew had helped install. The Void Stalker found itself caught between two forces it had never evolved to handle. Human hunting technology merged with Kelveri quantum science. Multiple direct hits, Trill reported, his patterns humming with excitement. Its quantum lattice is destabilizing. Keep pressing, Santos ordered. Don't let it shift phases. The entity thrashed in the quantum net, its tendrils lashing out with desperate strength. But each attack was met with precisely calculated responses from both ships, their combined technologies creating a cage of forced reality that the Void Stalker couldn't escape. Why? Ixal transmitted, maintaining targeting coordination even as she asked, "Why did your people choose this path? You could have used your evolutionary advantages for conquest, for dominion over other species." "Because that's not what humanity is," Santos replied, her voice carrying absolute conviction, even as she directed the vigilance assault. "We're not conquerors. We're protectors. It's written into our DNA just as deeply as our hunting instincts." The Void Stalker's form began to collapse as the combined assault overwhelmed its dimensional structure. But before it dissolved completely, it did something neither ship expected. It communicated. A burst of quantum information flooded both vessels' sensors. Images, impressions, concepts too alien for most species to comprehend. But humans had evolved to understand predator behavior, and the Kelveri had evolved to process complex quantum data. "It's showing us something," Ixal transmitted, her auxiliary brains processing the flood of information. "Other hunting grounds, other entities like itself." "More than that," Santos said grimly. "It's showing us their spawning grounds. Regions of space where reality runs thin, where they breed and multiply." She paused. "It's trying to convince us to stay away, to let them continue hunting freely." The entity's communication carried implicit threats, promises of overwhelming numbers and ancient power. But it had made a crucial mistake. It had assumed that humans could be intimidated by superior predators. "Targeting solutions complete," Santos announced. "Senior researcher, would you like to share in this honor?" Ixal's response carried the crystalline certainty of her species. "The luminous seeker stands ready." Both ships fired their killing shots simultaneously. The Void Stalker's form shattered across 11 dimensions, its quantum structure collapsing into ordered decay. But its final communication had changed everything. "You understand what this means," Santos said after the entity was gone. "The information it revealed, we now know where they all come from, where they breed, where they're vulnerable." "You mean to hunt them all?" Ixal transmitted. It wasn't a question. That's been humanity's goal from the beginning. We didn't build ships like the Vigilant just to protect. We built them to take the fight to the creatures that have been culling sapient species for millions of years. Santos' voice carried that unique human mixture of determination and savage purpose. "But now we have something we never had before." "What's that?" "Allies who understand. Your people's quantum technology, combined with our hunting experience." Santos let the thought hang in space. "Together, we could do more than just protect the galaxy. We could rid it of these horrors entirely." Ixal's sensory filaments wavered as she considered the implications. Her people had always pursued knowledge, seeking to understand the cosmos in all its beauty. But perhaps there was another kind of knowledge to be gained, the knowledge of how to fight back against the darkness, the knowledge of how to hunt the hunters. "My people would need to evolve," she transmitted, "to become something more than what we are." "All species evolve," Santos replied. "Humans evolve from prey into predators, and then from predators into protectors. Perhaps it's time for the Kelveri to evolve as well. Not losing your beauty or your wisdom, but adding strength to it, becoming something new." As both ships began scanning the sector for more quantum traces, Ixal reflected on how far they'd come. Her people had gained more than just protection. They had gained purpose. The humans had shown them that there was no contradiction between pursuing knowledge and defending it. The void between stars was still dark, still dangerous. But it was no longer empty. Humanity had filled it with something the Void Stalkers had never expected to encounter. Hope. Hope in the form of ships that hunted monsters. Hope in the form of predators who chose to protect rather than devour. And now that hope had evolved into something even stronger. Partnership. The galaxy's most elegant species and its most determined hunters, united in purpose. The Void Stalkers had spent millions of years culling civilizations that were alone and helpless. But they weren't culling anymore. They were being hunted. And this hunt would not end until the last of them learned what humanity had been teaching the galaxy one species at a time. The darkness should fear the light, and the greatest predators are those who choose to become protectors. The luminous seeker and the vigilant vanished into quantum space, bound for new hunting grounds. The age of being prey was over. The age of the guardians had begun.